Hey guys, welcome back to All Nighter Discussions. Joining me today is fellow screenwriter and the funniest person I follow on Twitter, Andy
Mm.
Compton. It's true,
Hey,
Andy. No false humility here, sir. Um,
uh,
no, Andy's recent accomplishments include not one but two screenplays making it to the Nichols semifinals competition, and that's just the latest in a series of accolades. Andy is also in production of his latest short film, Ethan and Edna. Do you know when Ethan and Edna might be coming out?
yeah, so we're working on post. Our goal is to be done by Halloween. And then, of course, we would start the festival circuit, which is probably like a year before it goes public. Uh,
Oh, oh boy.
but, but, like anyone who donated to our Kickstarter, which shout out to the 48 of you out there who are all listening to this for sure. Um, uh, they'll get to see it. They'll get like a private screen download, and then like I'll probably certain friends and stuff. I'll send out the link. But yeah, it won't go public for a year, so just keep following the story for 1 year, please.
You can also try to become Andy's friend for a free screener. So yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
that's one thing
a
you can
hundred
do.
a hundred bucks, and I will send it over.
All right. So today we're going to be talking about one of Chris Farley's, the iconic Chris Farley's most popular and beloved post SNL projects, Tommy Boy. Now, Andy,
Hmm.
you are a Chris Farley fan, correct? When did you first get into him, and what made you first a fan of his?
Yeah, so I am 33. I was born in 1988, and I have two older brothers. And so in the 90s, I was, a young kid, wasn't even 10 years old yet, and they were big comedy fans. And, any music that my brothers liked, I liked. Any movies they liked, I liked. It was that kind of thing. So on Saturday nights, we always watched SNL. And like, I remember I was so young, I didn't even get like any of the jokes. And Chris Farley, though, was my favorite because you didn't even have to like get anything that he was doing on an intellectual level. Like, literally, he's just a guy with so much energy, just jumping through tables and like high wiring over the crowd and stuff. And I just thought he was so funny. And I mean, really, my brothers thought he was super funny. So I thought he was funny. But yeah, I mean, I was 6, 7 years old, maybe. And watching SNL regularly. And that's where I fell in love with him. Saw Tommy Boy, Black Sheep, all that stuff. I mean, I was a huge fan. He was one of my favorite actors, him and Adam Sandler. I mean, I use the term favorite actor like loosely. I mean, just my favorite celebrities that I was even exposed to, were Farley, Sandler, Spade, um, all those
That
guys.
whole
So
era, that
that
generation of SNL alum.
Yeah, that whole generation. I mean, and even like, Molly Shannon and Sherry O'Terry and like all those other people, Mike Myers, I loved Wayne's World as a kid. It's I think the craziest thing is watching those now, all those movies, because I realized that I didn't understand 90% of the jokes or 90% of the movie because I was such a little kid. I had no clue what they were talking about. And there's like a blowjob joke or something like that that I just did not get. Are we allowed to swear on this show?
Oh, it's encouraged.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah,
All right,
this is a
awesome.
very
Yeah.
anti-children's program here.
Okay, good. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's like my lane.
yeah,
But yeah, anyway, it's I mean, to sound corny, like my entire life, basically, I've been a Farley fan.
yeah. I mean, I know that's a lot of people's experiences with him, like growing up with again that era of SNL, and he defined that time of its period for so many people. And as somebody who came to appreciate him after he passed away, I'm somebody who went back and discovered all of those old things, the films, the sketches. I mean, there are
Mhm.
some performers whose personality shines their talent, and some people's whose talents outshine their personality. But he was a total like kind of dual force in that
Yeah,
realm. I think he really took his energy that was so unique to him and his personality that was so unique, and he channeled it into this. finely tuned machine, this perfect machine of comedy.
Mhm.
But we are talking about Tommy Boy, which was his first attempt after SNL to, become a movie star and
Mhm.
to move on from SNL after having gotten fired, actually, which
Mhm.
shocked a lot of people at the time.
Mhm.
So, first, I actually wanted to ask, just to set context, really, do you watch modern SNL?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really watch any TV as it rolls out because it's just like the way that we watch entertainment now, or the way we
Mm,
consume things, is streaming and all these things. But I pay attention to the YouTube SNL drops, especially like right before they got on the show. I was a huge fan of Kyle Mooney and Beck Bennett. I think it was Good Neighbor was their sketch group on, and like Nick Rutherford, who is now a writer on SNL. But yeah, I pay attention. SNL has been like a special thing to me, like again, like to sound corny, like my whole life. Because I got into it so young because I just wanted to whatever my brothers thought was cool, I thought was cool. And it's kind of been a through line. I mean, I paid attention through, the late 90s, and then like I really loved that. I paid a lot of attention again when it was like Andy Samberg and Bill Hader and Kristen Wiig and Maya Rudolph and that whole kind of late 2000s cast. So yeah, I still pay attention, but not as religiously as I used to.
yeah, well, I think that's a lot of people's experiences. You grow up, and it's a very important thing to you.
Hmm.
It's something that you can watch every week and really feel like it's almost like a social experience for me. Like I'm seeing my
Hmm.
friends again after a week. But
Yeah.
then you grow up, and then you don't stop being friends with them necessarily, but you have new friends now, and it's almost
Yeah.
like it's kind of like that to me. But you brought up a lot of very iconic performers from the more modern SNL, but I would like to ask, do
Hmm.
you think anybody will be able to match the status and the cult of personality, really, that Chris Farley had? Do you even think that's possible? Not talking just about raw talent, but can somebody define SNL the way he defined it, and others like John Belushi defined it?
Hmm. I mean, it's a tall order
Hmm.
because it's really, really insane that he died in 97, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, it's really insane that he is still the cult icon today. That, like what year were you born?
98, a year after he
Ni-
died.
Yeah, so it's like, people who weren't even on this earth whenever he was, have gone back and been like, wow, this guy was incredible. Like, I
Oh
mean,
yeah,
is this guy the best SNL performer that was ever on the show? And that's debatable, but like to be consistently in that debate is, it says a lot. And for
yeah.
people to still, I mean, I went to college late. I went to college when I was about to turn 27, and I spent 4 years there. So I was hanging around people who were like a decade younger than me. And like everyone knows Farley. People have seen Tommy Boy, they've seen Black Sheep, and I mean, I'm talking about film school nerds too, so maybe that makes a difference. But um, yeah, it's just I don't know if anyone will. I mean, of the, say since 2010 until now, which is insane. That was 11 years ago now. Um, I don't know. I don't know if any, because there, of course, there's uber talented people. I mean, like, I think like I never knew Bill Hader was going to do the things that he's doing now. And it's like, I mean, he was always one of the funniest performers to ever be on SNL, in my opinion. But to be now writing and directing at the level he is and mixing in the drama and, all these things, it's really impressive. But I was just, I don't know, man. I don't, I would, if I had to pick yes or no gun to my head, I would say no,
Mm.
because I mean, he's just an icon.
Yeah, and you touched on something that's a great distinction. So Bill Hader, I mean, Bill Hader is one of the most talented comedians of his generation. I think
Mhm.
the man's raw talent is unparalleled. But what's
Mhm.
interesting to me is now that he's doing things like Barry, I almost look back and say, "Oh right, he was on SNL." Like that's almost like a prelude to the real calling that he had. So
Yeah.
despite the fact that he had that talent and that force, it's still not like he defined it or that it defined him, right? It almost feels like it's more of a stepping stone. But talking about Chris Farley and the iconic person that he was, I think what Tommy Boy does, and the reason people still talk about it, is it really captured his essence. And
Mhm.
it's like the perfect star vehicle in that way. I'm not going to call it a perfect movie. I don't know
Mhm.
how you feel about it just as a film,
Mhm.
but it was the perfect script for him and the perfect character for him to embody. So yeah, getting into the film a little bit, it's
Mhm.
the story of he's the son of like somebody who owns an auto factory, right?
Mhm.
The dim-witted son of an auto management person,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
and through what we would call nepotism, he rises through the ranks very quickly and has to save his father's company
Mhm.
um, with the help of his sneering buddy, played by David Spade.
Mhm.
Now, you have a lot of memories, I'm sure, of watching Tommy Boy. So why don't you take me through the evolution of where you stand with this movie, starting when you were younger and now where you stand on it?
Yeah, it's wild. So I watched the movie last night because I knew we were doing this today. And I hadn't seen it in years, and I can't remember the last time I watched it all the way through. Like it literally could have been over a decade. Uh, could have been more, could have been a little less. I just can't remember. But
Hmm.
it's a movie that I know like the back of my hand because when I was little, I used to do this thing where I would uh we had a bunch of VHS tapes, and we would a lot of them were like recorded from HBO would play a movie, and we'd put a blank tape in and illegally record it. The statute of limitations is up, right? They can't arrest me for that, right? I
I
mean,
think
this was the 90s.
The HBO police are still in full brigade. I mean, it's basically a fascist
Yeah.
regime over there.
Yeah, well, I was just lying, so that's good. I didn't do that. But we had Tommy Boy, we had a VHS tape. But like I would do this with like Mighty Ducks 2. I made that tweet that we talked about before recording about movies that I used to just wear out. Like we had the VHS, and I would literally watch the movie and credits would roll, and I'd stop and rewind to the beginning and just play it again. And like I was just like a psycho about watching the same movie over and over when I was a kid. And so I did that with Tommy Boy, and it was at the point where like I mean, last night I was rewatching this thing, and I think it's been years and years since I've seen it, but I still remember lines word for word, like before the person said it, and exactly what scene was coming. And that said, it's still like it was such an enjoyable watch, and I don't know how much of that was the nostalgia factor, but for me, I was so young. I mentioned earlier I didn't really understand the movie as a child the way that I do as an adult, but also now as an adult who writes scripts and like I have some understanding of structure and character and all these things that need to be working in a story. I couldn't agree more with what you said, that this was like the perfect vehicle for Farley because I mean there's documentaries and things that talk about this, but he had um that feeling inside always that like I'm just like the dumb fat guy that falls down, and that's the only reason people like me.
Yeah, with a heart of
uh
gold, though,
with a
that's a
heart of
key
gold, yeah, but
ingredient. Yeah.
I think he didn't even know that. I think
Mhm.
he literally in his mind all he thought was I'm the fatty that falls down, and that's it. Like that's why they like me. They don't necessarily think that I'm like funny on an intellectual level. Like if, from what I understand about the guy, that's a lot of what I've heard. Is that he feels that way about himself or felt that way. Um, but watching Tommy Boy, it's like, and again, as someone who's knows more about movies now than I did then, it's the movie has so much heart for the dumb comedy that it's supposed to be. It has a surprising amount of heart, and like literally the brand that I'm trying to be as a writer is comedies with a lot of heart, or you could call it drama with a lot of laughs, but it's like the intersection of those two genres, dramedy if you want to call it that. But
Did
I,
you
I
just
love
invent that term?
I just invented that term. Yeah, I need to go
Wow.
trademark it right away. But Yeah, like I mean, that's why like I'm a huge fan of like Judd Apatow movies because I think he kind of did that a lot,
Oh
was
yeah,
taking
yeah.
these dumb comedies and injecting these meaningful relationships or whatever into it that make us really care. And I'm watching Tommy Boy last night, and I was just thinking, like, I mean, there's a couple like dramatic parts in that movie. Like, I mean, when his father passes away, you really feel for Chris Farley in that moment, like when he's standing in front of the grave and the bagpipes are playing, and then the whole crowd leaves, but he's still standing there. And then he goes and he walks through an empty Callahan auto parts factory, sits on the loading dock. Um, that's like heavy for this comedy that stars these two SNL guys in the 90s, when really the only like made from SNL movies we'd seen so far, I think, were like Wayne's World. And I really don't know. I think Tommy Boy was like 94.
Yeah. Well, I
But
mean, the very first I think was like the Blues Brothers, but that was way back
oh,
in the '80s.
yeah, for sure. But
But this
but then
new
like,
era, yeah.
yeah, but Farley
And
showing his vulnerability, and that's really what made him a special performer, is how willing he was to be vulnerable. And to me, it's just tragic that, you know, as I was watching that and having all those feelings about that, I have to wonder what kind of actor that he was going to blossom into later in life. Because to show that in his first movie, like, hey, I have a little bit of drama in me. It's like, did anyone think Sandler was going to become the actor that he did when he did Billy Madison? It's like no one had a clue. And like, so to me, I think that Farley like really showed the potential to like, what if he did just do like a straight up drama one day, when he was older?
yeah,
Who knows?
he could have made Uncut Gems too. You know, it
He could have.
could have been a duo.
Yeah. He
No,
could
I
have been
mean,
Howard in that movie.
yeah, you touched on a lot of great points. And going with the first about how this shows his vulnerability. I mean, first off, when the dad dies, it's a shock. And
Yeah.
that's what pulled me in emotionally. I mean, it was funny. I was laughing during the pratfalls and the little back and forth between him and Spade.
Hmm.
But no, that moment, that's when the stakes set in.
Hmm.
And his acting, I mean, I don't know how much you know this, but behind the scenes, he really wanted to try drama. He really wanted to get out of the box he didn't put in,
Hmm.
because he did think he was just the dumb fat guy.
Hmm.
And he really wanted to make a movie about Fatty Arbuckle.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Hmm.
And you know who else wanted to make a movie about that man?
Hmm.
Was John Belushi.
That explains it.
Yeah. And I mean, the parallels between him and Belushi, I mean, it's like exhausting pointing out
Hmm.
how closely they mirror each other.
Yeah.
But I mean, John Belushi was a very, I don't want to call him smug, but he had that kind of ironic demeanor about him,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
There was nothing ironic about Chris Farley, at least
No.
not in this performance and not in what defined him in the public eye.
Hmm.
Like for me, my favorite Chris Farley sketch on SNL wasn't his super famous ones. It was the Chris Farley show. Do you remember those?
Oh, yes, dude. Yeah, it's so good.
Yeah,
Um,
and
yeah,
his
just vulnerability at 150, just being nowadays everyone's doing that in comedy, which like I do that too. But everyone, it's like we're all about being vulnerable and like being relatable and like, saying the things that not everyone wants to say out loud, but we all feel, and to do it in a funny way. I feel like in the 90s, I don't know how many people were putting all that on Front Street. I mean, that's part of what stand-up comedy is, but like I feel like stand-up comedy was maybe like a little more bold and a little more tough rather than being like showing all of my like mental health struggles and
I think you're exactly
vulnerabilities,
right.
I
No, I
don't know.
think
It's
you're
just a
exactly right.
theory. Yeah, but
When
Farley was doing it back then.
when I think of '90s comedy, like stand-up comedy, I think of George Carlin. I think
Hmm.
of Bill Hicks, like these
Yeah.
intellectual guys who used
Yeah,
comedy as almost like a weapon against their enemies,
for sure.
right?
Chris Rock, he was
Yeah, Chris Rock.
bold. Yeah.
Yeah, and they were abrasive and they were
Hmm.
challenging. And I
Yep.
mean, I love all of the guys that we just mentioned.
Hmm.
But in an era where that's what comedy was to a lot of people, that and just doing a bunch of imitations, Dana Carvey style. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Chris Farley forged he forged a whole new archetype. I mean, I don't think I'm going to be controversial when I say there are many actors right now trying to replicate what Chris Farley did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, they would admit that he has a huge influence.
Mhm.
Now, what also makes him special is his relationship and partnership with David Spade, right? I mean,
Mhm.
when people think about this movie, they probably think about their relationship and their back and forth so much. So how do you think that stuff holds up?
Oh, so good. I mean, the heart of a good comedy duo is opposites attract, you know. I mean, so you have this big huge personality who's not an intellectual and he's always doing the wrong thing, and then you have his counterpart who is highly intellectual and is very critical and obviously more intelligent. And I just think that that's the perfect back and forth. You know what I mean? Like
Oh
everything
yeah.
Farley does is criticized by Spade, and he's just so he's Farley is so much physically more imposing. He's a bigger guy. He could kill Spade, but in a battle of wits, you know, Spade always wins. He can always beat him. And like, yeah, I just think, you know, any so many great, not everyone, but so many great comedy duos. It's, you know, two polar opposites. It's just teeing you up for comedy.
Exactly. And knowing about their real life friendship even like enhances this for me. Like knowing that fat guy in a little coat was an actual thing Chris Farley would do to annoy him. I mean, come on,
Yeah,
that takes an already hilarious bit, and that makes it even more special, right?
yeah,
Because you know that really meant something to those two guys.
yeah.
Now, I'm going to ask you what you think the funniest moment of this film is, if you can, because there's a lot of contenders.
Okay. Um. Hmm.
I can start with mine if that
Yeah,
helps.
I'd love that. Yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah.
mean
It's
it.
better than dead air, right?
I
Well, I
mean,
think.
unless I give the wrong answer, and who knows? I mean, I could
Well, there's
potentially
no
ruin the
wrong.
entire thing.
There's no
Yeah,
wrong answer. Yeah, let me know
the,
yours.
the funniest part is when the dad dies. No, no. See, that's the
Yes,
wrong answer.
hilarious.
Um, actually, my favorite part. I don't think this is many people's favorite part, but when they're
Mhm.
fighting over the radio station,
Dude,
and
that
they
is so funny. I was just gonna say that I shared that
really,
only that scene to my Instagram story last night. Just
oh my
that part,
god.
yeah. When it goes into "Don't you remember you told me you love me?" Yeah, I fucking love that scene. It's so funny.
Now I've seen a couple of times that joke has been kind of people have tried that joke since then.
Yeah.
I don't know if this movie came up with that, but man, like it's just the sheer intensity of Chris Farley as a performer, like the tears streaming
Yes.
down his face the way he gets into it. It's perfect.
Yeah, it's so funny. And then like later when they recreate the bit when they sing like it's the end of the world and
Yeah,
a couple other things, but then they're singing a Spanish song that's like a really soft like Spanish ballad, and like that's hilarious too. Like that repeating car radio bit is funny. So I'll try to think of one that isn't that. Um God, what's a really funny part? Holy shit, it's so hard to recollect one outside of that because that's what I was gonna say.
I
Let's
don't
circle
know.
back. Let's
Okay, yeah,
talk
we'll
about
circle
other
back.
parts of the movie and circle back.
But yeah, so another thing I wanted to ask is how much you think this movie succeeds because of Chris Farley versus because of the script. And I know it's probably hard to separate those things, but it's a discussion worth having, especially from the point of view of a screenwriter, right? So,
Yeah.
were there any moments where you thought, if Chris Farley weren't doing this bit, I don't think I would be into this so much?
Yeah, I actually last night I was thinking about that. Like who well really I was watching also. I did a lot of prep for this. I watched the I Am Chris Farley documentary last night, and it was
Classic,
actually the
recommended.
first time I'd seen it in full. I'd seen like clips on YouTube, but I never watched the whole thing. So I watched that, and they were covering. I don't want to stray too far, but they were talking about Matt Foley, and I
Yes.
was sitting there thinking about, you know, he started doing that on the stage at Second City in Chicago, and you know, there's endless talent on that stage at Second City. Like even like the original David Spade in that sketch, at least on one of the times they had on video, was Tim Meadows. And then like Bob Odenkirk wrote it. So like, I mean, there's elite talent that they're household names now. Um, who could have done Matt Foley? Could they have done it as well as Chris Farley? And there are arguably a bunch of funny people who could do it. And even if you took today's actors, like I think like a good candidate would be like Danny McBride to try to do Matt Foley. But I just don't think anyone's over the top commitment to that character. I don't think that anyone could live up to what Farley did. Like even like, I mean, just the physical movements of everything he did in that sketch are so funny. So to go back to Tommy Boy, yeah, people could have played the part and it would have been fine. But like, no, I don't think anyone was doing that unique thing back then too, that Farley, to me, at least in my experience, was the first person I really saw doing that, was putting all of his insecurities and vulnerabilities right out on Front Street. And it's totally a defense mechanism to be like, I already know these things about me, so you can't make fun of me for that. You know, like I know I'm fat, I know I'm kind of dumb. I know that like I'm scared around girls and like, you know, all these things. Uh, to put all that on Front Street in this role specifically, like, no, I don't think anyone could have played it as well as him. There's a level of depth that he played to the drama that, knowing what I know now, put all that aside and just put me as an adult in 94, 95 when this came out, and all I know is Chippendales and Matt Foley. uh, I wouldn't have saw that coming. That he, because it's not like he gives like a crazy dramatic performance. It's not like he's going to win an
Mhm.
Oscar, but it is impressive. Some of those parts in the movie, like when he's on the boat with Michelle and he's wearing the life jacket and the kids are about to yell at him and insult him from the shore. Before that, he's talking about spending time out there with his dad. And when he gets to the end of that little soft spoken monologue, he has tears in his eyes, like visible tears in his eyes. And you really like, it's totally viable. Like he delivered the shit out of those few lines in the boat. And yeah, last night was like a coaster of emotions for me. Just like wondering what could have been, because I'm like a big fan of Sandler nowadays. Like when he does dramatic roles, I just still think it's so cool the way that his career has gone down, being that I was obsessed with him when Billy Madison and Happy Gilmore and The Wedding Singer were all coming out. And to see how far that dude went, and like just how much talent was inside of that guy who was doing the shampoo versus conditioner bit in
Mm.
Billy Madison. I just have to wonder what, and like we've seen Chris Rock do drama, and like a few of those
Comedians can,
guys.
yeah, comedians can do drama. I think
Yeah.
the source of their comedy would be the same source as their drama. And
Mhm.
you're talking about Chris Farley's insecurities and these touching moments of the film. And we have to talk about this with Chris Farley, his battle with his inner demons, right?
Mhm.
I mean, drugs, alcohol, but more specifically, how that affected his relationships. How that
Mhm.
affected his relationship with his dad,
Yeah.
with his colleagues at SNL. So he was really, I think, channeling. I'm not saying he was a method actor, but I think he allowed himself to channel those very real emotions that he was going through into that performance. And I doubt that anybody was really expecting Chris Farley to be giving those parts his all,
Yeah.
uh, because I don't know how much people knew about where he was in his life.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think he could have played Fatty Arbuckle. I think
Mhm.
he could have had a hell of a career had he just, had he been able to defeat those demons.
Yeah.
But, we can get more into his issues there later, because there is a lot to say there when we get into the kind of later movies.
Yeah.
But yeah, staying with Tommy Boy, there is one thing I want to highlight. Rob Lowe and Bo Derek.
Yeah.
What did you think of that? How do you think that stuff holds up? Because I just think it was just weird. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't mean like it was like I couldn't watch it. I thought it was so weird. I just like, huh, that's such an interesting decision. I'm not sure if most like mainstream comedies would even go for a joke like that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was kind of weird, but like honestly, I feel like it's hard for me to have like a super objective look because, like I said, before I was even 10 years old, I saw this movie probably like 30 times. Uh, so I don't know if it's just so commonplace to me that I know. I don't know. It's just like, yeah, well, that's who they are, in the movie. Like, I don't know. It didn't really hit me as weird, but I can see how it would be weird. Do you just mean like the type of scam that they're running, like presenting themselves as son and mother? Do you mean the actual actors, like
I think there was,
chemistry?
I think it's just like something about the casting. I mean, obviously the fact that they're pretending to be mother and son, but there's
Mhm.
something about seeing Rob Lowe just make out with Bo Derek
Yeah.
that was, and I don't remember at what point in his career he was, but Rob Lowe was a disgraced figure for a while
Yeah.
after that sex tape. So, and he's not credited in the movie.
I didn't even know
So,
that he had a sex tape.
yeah, but that's
That's
something like,
hilarious. I know that he used to have like that kind of like bad boy thing for a little bit, but like that's
yeah,
crazy. It's so crazy that like literally I don't know a lot about Rob Lowe's career. I know Tommy Boy and then Parks and Rec and like
yeah.
all that shit in the middle I'm not familiar with, and it couldn't be more polar opposites of a person's career to like from his character in Tommy Boy to his character in Parks and Rec.
Yeah, it is really satisfying to see him get taken out, though. As far as
Yeah.
villains go, he was pretty well cast.
Yeah, yeah, and like honestly, as far as the storyline part of that, yeah, it's kind of weird, but I sort of do like, because you're watching this dumb comedy, and a lot of times, like, just, the writing isn't, amazing, but the fact that they did weave in this whole thing of like, here's the police report, you two are legally married, which means that your marriage to my dad was always null and void. Therefore, you can like the way that they make it work out in the end with logic. I was like, all right, like for like a dumb comedy, you have to suspend your disbelief for a little bit. But I didn't absolutely hate that. Again, if I had just seen this movie for the first time, I could probably give like a better criticism. Um, but right now it's like I've seen this movie so many times that like it's kind of hard to step outside
Yeah,
of
it's
that.
not something that you have to dislike or have to be outraged by. I
Mhm.
guess it was like, what is that something? How did that age? I guess was the question I really should have asked. But
Yeah.
but it is a great twist. Having Bo Derek like come out of the water and that very that whole reference to 10 and you think that I thought there was going to be like a love triangle or I definitely didn't think that she was going to be the villain.
Yeah.
Um, although she gets away with it at the end, which is another surprising
That
thing.
now that's a weird part. Like but I do think it's sort of funny that like Zelensky is such a scumbag that he literally does not give a shit about everything he just found out about this woman. He's just like, "Hey, you're attractive. You want to go get a drink at my bar or whatever." Uh I did think that was funny because it's a total what the fuck moment. And I guess that's the good thing about comedies is that you're always willing to suspend your disbelief and just be like,
Yeah.
"Hey, who cares?" Like it's literally Dan Aykroyd. I'm not taking this role that serious to begin with. Like, it's a silly thing that's happening. But like, yeah, that
What?
was a weird choice though. Like, I just think on the screenwriter's part, who I'm not even familiar with who wrote this, but I just think if anything, it's more funny to just be like, yeah, I don't give a fuck. This is what's gonna happen at the end because it's kind of funny.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Dan Aykroyd sells it to be sure.
Yeah.
Now, this is I'm not going to call this a hot take, but let's call this a mildly warm take of mine.
Oh shit.
Is
Let's hear it.
this a comedy? Is this a film that is the product of the Clinton era? Do you does that question even make sense? Can you say a yes or no to that?
Like, is it like, is this like a blowjob thing or a
Well, I
crime bill thing?
like this I don't know, like because obviously you look at like 80s movies and most
Mhm.
people see that as the product of Reagan, or at least that's the association in their mind. And
Mhm.
with this, there was like this whole like, well, there are good businesses and there are bad businesses, and good, the good businessmen are always going to be the bad ones just through, their sheer goodness, right?
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I had never considered that, but I mean, I did think now watching it as an adult, just like, the effects of like, you know, uh corporate America, the big guy eating up the small guy, and in this small town like Sandusky, Callahan was one of the few in the beginning of the movie. Whenever he first gets Tommy, when Richard picks up Tommy from the airport, they're driving back, and Tommy's eating the M&Ms, and he's like, "Oh, what happened? When did the tire plant close down?" Or he's like, "What happened to the tire plant?" And Richard's like, "Closed down last month." And I, again, something I never would have caught as a child. And then now as an adult, I'm like, okay, this town is already like, it's been touched by a lack of employment. And then to know that Callahan is next, it's like, oh, this is going to cripple this town. Uh, so yeah, I mean, I did catch on to that a little bit more this time around than when I was a kid. That like, there's definitely, when you put it like that and what was going on in the country, like, yeah, I wouldn't argue with it.
Yeah, I just have a theory that it's the films that seem least political that best reflect what is going on in the country, right? Because it's like reflecting just the subconscious.
Mhm.
So just through that moment occurred to me when we meet Zelensky and just like the back and forth that goes on there. And I'm sure many people are going to be mad that I'm trying to politicize Tommy Boy of all things, but there's enough distance to that time that I think it's a question worth asking, and especially because Chris Farley's next film was a political comedy, an
It was a
overtly political
political
comedy.
action thriller called Black Sheep.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, and it's not political in like an actual satirical way. Like, let me put it this way: either you're a liberal or a conservative. I don't think that affects your viewing of that movie at all. But
No, I don't
um,
even remember one of his brother's political stances
no,
from the
and
movie. I don't think they
that
talk about it, which is smart.
that is smart in a sense. I don't think that's creatively smart. I would have.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a guy who I don't like movies that almost have substance. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But hey, I'm not saying that Chris Farley had to go out and make Parasite, which I see that you have on your wall behind you.
Yeah. Cool. It's a very film school thing, a very film student thing to have Parasite up behind me, but it is what it is.
A classic. It's already a classic.
I
But
just
yeah,
replaced Pulp Fiction. So that's everything you need to know about me, America, and world.
I support that
I didn't
personally.
actually, but anyway.
Oh, well, now I feel like, all right, Quentin, don't come after me.
No, I love Pulp Fiction. I love Quentin Tarantino. I mean, I am a very stereotypical film student.
Yeah, I mean, I
It's
just thought it was
pathetic.
cool that I like championing a newer film like Parasite rather than hanging on to old. Like, if there's a
Oh,
movie that I think of
yeah.
as okay, this is a film school movie,
Hmm.
um, like Citizen Kane. Like, obviously, Kane is a great movie. I don't need to be told it's a great movie every time I take a film class.
Yeah, yeah. I would
I got the
totally
point.
agree with that. And I
Yeah.
think even though there's something to be said about teaching the classics, which you should, I do think there should be a focus on what's coming out right now if you're teaching a new batch of filmmakers or a new batch of screenwriters. Like, there's something to knowing what's going on. Excuse me.
Yeah.
I'm drinking a
Teaching.
LaCroix and just fucking burping all over. I'm sorry. Actually, it's not LaCroix. We have I'm going to do a Schnucks plug. We have a grocery store called Schnucks in Missouri. And this is an off brand Schnucks water. I really like it. It's $1 cheaper. So hit up Schnucks, man. And Schnucks, send me a check.
Do you
But
have
anyway,
a place called Missouri?
like a city called Misery, Missouri.
I'm talking about
Uh,
anything in Missouri that's called Misery. I just had that quick question.
no, we make jokes about it. Some of us who aren't the biggest fans of our state. I don't know. Missouri's fine. It sucks, but it's all right.
Okay, you're not living in Texas, so at least there's that.
No, I'm not in Texas. Yeah. Yeah. I would rather be in Missouri, I think, from what I read in the news.
I would rather
But
be in Missouri from what I read
yeah.
in the news.
Yeah. Also,
That just
not hating on Texas. If you're in Texas, Texas is my favorite state. But if you're not in Texas, I hate Texas. Can't stand it. Anyway,
Um, but Black Sheep. Okay, so
yeah,
it's a movie I saw,
yeah.
and I actually watched it with my girlfriend. She had never, she might have never even heard of Chris Farley. She was like not a fan or whatever.
Hmm.
And her perspective was the main guy is funny or at least likable,
Hmm.
and this movie sucks a lot.
Uh-huh.
And
Yeah.
I, as biased as I am, because I adore the man, and I
Hmm.
don't want to just hate on one of his movies. I've
Hmm.
been wrestling with that question for a long time.
Hmm.
So I want to ask you the question: does Black Sheep suck?
I can't give a great answer on that because I wanted to rewatch it, but I didn't get to. So
Okay.
it's currently a movie that I watched as a child a lot. And maybe even in my teenage years, I saw it once or twice, but like not that much. I was probably like a little drunk, a little high, having a good time. Probably don't remember the movie that well. Anyway, um, yeah, I can't give a great answer on that because I just watch movies in a much different way than I used to when I was a kid. I thought a lot of real shit movies were like great movies when I was a kid. But I do know that it was rushed to really capitalize on the hype of Tommy Boy, the unexpected hype of Tommy Boy. And I know I was watching that documentary last night, and Lauren Michaels talked about that, how they optioned the script whenever the writer was only on page 60, and they were like, it's a first draft, like you should really give it some time and let them mold this thing into the precious care that they took with Tommy Boy. Because I think Tommy Boy is like, I mean, of course it's most comedy fans think it's like a cult classic, but like even on like a just like a movie level, outside of it being a cult classic, like I think that it works. Like I like it. I
Mhm.
think that there's a rich story in there, and I think that there's a rich character. And again, I'm not going to put it up there with like, the greatest films of all time, but all I'm saying is like for like a dumb comedy that a lot of people dismissed back then too, like it didn't get good reviews when it came out.
Siskel
um
and Ebert put it at their bottom 10 of the year.
oh really?
Yeah, and I think Siskel even like took some shots at Chris Farley. He was like, "You're no John Belushi" or some shit like that.
Yeah, I mean, shit, people are precious with their heroes, like
Yeah,
maybe nowadays people are saying you're no Chris Farley, to some new guy
right.
who's doing that act. But like, anyway, with Black Sheep, I'll just say that I'd probably still like it and think it's flawed in its story. But like, it's to me, those Farley movies are more about just like funny set pieces. And Tommy Boy stands apart as like, oh shit, this is like an actual like story. Like
Mhm.
it's driven by character who has a clear want, and it's something that we can emotionally invest in. Whereas I think they tried to replicate that in Black Sheep with his brother, but I just don't know how much it actually came across. Haven't seen it in a long time.
So it's interesting because I have such a different response because I saw this before Tommy Boy, and
Wow.
I used to at least think that Black Sheep was like original in its own way, and that's not an impression I have anymore after having seen Tommy Boy.
Hmm.
I'm not going to hate on it. There are plenty of things I like about it. It's more frustrating for me because I actually think it's like a really good idea.
Hmm.
Um, as we all know, like politicians tend to have these relatives who embarrass them in the press,
Hmm.
and
Hmm. Yeah, I
and
love it. I love it. It's my favorite thing ever when that happens.
yeah, like it's so great with the Bushes because everybody does it. Like
Yeah.
everybody, like Jeb does it to George. George does
Hmm.
it right back. It's
It's
awesome.
fantastic for sure.
But I think that's a great vehicle for Chris Farley because especially like when you think of people like who was it like Billy Carter or Clinton's brother, like they were like these good old boys who were like
Hmm.
just really dim, and that's right up Chris Farley's alley. Apparently, that's the thing he's going to do for a while in his
Hmm.
career. The problem is I mean, they're just trying to make Tommy Boy again, and there are just a lot of tangential set pieces that have nothing really to do with the story. And this is a case where I think the story could have it could have been really cool if they just developed it more, right? And David Spade's character, that relationship is just nothing compared to the one in Tommy Boy. Like they really don't feel like they have a connection or even much of a chemistry there. I think because they weren't getting along by that point. I don't know if you know that.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, I think there were some issues during Tommy Boy, and it came down to really petty stuff like David Spade hung out with Rob Lowe, and they didn't invite Chris Farley, and Chris Farley was very
I've
upset.
heard Spade tell that story now that I think about it. Like they were both always fighting over Rob Lowe. Like they both wanted to be his best friend.
I mean, I want him to be my best friend.
I do too.
Yeah. But I think things actually got pretty bad I don't quote me on this, and I don't want to just be throwing around stuff, but I know for a fact that they weren't getting along like they usually were making Black Sheep. So unfortunately, I think that reflected.
Well, I know too, like Farley was a guy with a heart of gold, but like a lot of people have also talked about people who know him, like that he was a hothead, and he would get angry, like just flip a switch.
He would get defensive. He would get defensive for sure.
Yeah, he'd get defensive, or like Spade told this story on Conan, or no, it was Sandler and Spade were on Conan together, and Sandler was telling Farley stories, and he was saying that like Farley used to just snap, and he would come over to Sandler and just be like, I'm gonna kill him, and he'd be like, don't kill him, like, and it'd be like because like Spade was like talking to a girl in the room that like Farley would want to talk to but didn't have the courage, so he wasn't. And because Spade talked to her, he like would get weird, just things like that. I mean, and also he was a young guy. He didn't live to be like an older, wiser version of himself. So, but like, anyway, and you factor in drugs and alcohol too.
Of course, but you're 30, is that right?
33.
You're the same age as him when he passed away.
I realized that last night during that documentary.
That's actually crazy.
Yeah, for sure. I hope I survived this year. I don't know. I don't know.
I mean, if you survive 2020, I think your
I'm good for 2021. Yeah, for sure. I'm vaccinated. I would try to wear a mask everywhere. I try not to go like rock climbing or anything like that.
Oh, this is not the time to be rock climbing. I just don't trust it.
No, me neither. Yeah, for sure.
I don't like.
But I've heard a lot of stories about Farley just being like crazy, and it was like a thing where he would snap on you, and then 5 minutes later he would come up and give you a bear hug. Like, I'm sorry, I know that I'm crazy. Like he was just a wild dude with a huge personality. But beneath all that, like everyone agrees that like he had a heart of gold. He was just like an emotional, huge personality, and you could see it on stage and in his performances. Like when we were talking about could someone else have played Tommy and Tommy Boy, I think the reason that he even had the potential dramatic acting skill that he had is because like if that guy was performing, there's never a second that he's mailing it in. Like he was always 100% on, locked in. Like people talked about it because in comedy that's like a thing. Like I've like I'm not good at it, but I've done like improv and stuff, and like part of that is just being locked in and being a good scene partner. It's not about you, it's about like being there and giving and being generous to your scene partner and just being present, so that you can have the best scene possible. And I heard like Molly Shannon, and I think who else? There was a couple people in that documentary who were talking about Chris's ability to be that, is that he was getting the hugest laughs, but he was also very present and always like trying to be a giving scene partner, because when he was on stage or on screen, there was just no phoning it in. He was born to be a performer, really.
So I've been reading this biography of him, actually, the Chris Farley show.
I can't read. That's cool though. Tell me what it said.
You can write at least, so you got half of it down.
I've never read my own writing.
Yeah, it's well, that's why we pay people to read our writing for us.
Exactly.
We pay them
Shout
very
out
good
Screenplay.
No, but it's a really good book that I recommend. It's compiled entirely of interviews from people in his life.
Mhm.
And everybody would, it's almost like a contradiction with him because on the one hand, he is the biggest personality on stage. He was getting the biggest laughs and, he was the star. But at the same
Mhm.
time, there was a generosity to his performing where he really would share the wealth with you. Right.
Mhm.
And I think he wasn't just, what he was trying to do wasn't make himself the star. That was a byproduct of his real goal, which is just creating the funniest thing possible.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's why, even though it's very competitive at SNL, and there's a lot of one-upsmanship, but nobody had that with Chris Farley. Nobody felt competitive with him, and nobody was ever mad at him that he would steal a scene or chew the scenery. Because I mean, they knew his art was in the right place.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. I heard a thing with Sandler where he was talking about how he was like, I would have been totally different if I was getting the kind of laughs that he got every single time he went on stage. Like, I would have been a lot more cocky. And it was like Farley was never cocky. Like, there would be like enormous, just like a sea of laughter that would like shake the building. And he would come off stage and like Sandler would be like, dude, you were killing him out there. And Farley would be like, really? You think so? Like, you think they thought it was funny? Like, genuinely, like, he just never truly believed in it or he never gloated about it, which I think just speaks to his character. I mean, he was just like such a gentle soul who like never, part of what made him special and unique and sweet was that you could tell that he like he knew how funny he was, but he also wasn't confident at the same
Mhm.
time. And there's just something, again, to go back to what we said earlier about how a lot of people are doing this style of comedy now, is like we're all vulnerable, we're all putting it out on Front Street, all our emotional issues, our mental health issues, and we're owning it, so that they don't own us. But I just don't think a lot of people were doing, like, dude, I went to school, I graduated in '07. I didn't even graduate. I dropped out, but then I went to college years later. But
Mhm.
like when I was in high school, no one talked about having anxiety. No one talked about being depressed. Like, literally, I don't know, maybe other people were, but me and my circle of people I was in, like, you just like buried all your feelings and like you didn't talk about it. Whereas now I think it's really healthy and really great that like so many young people are like very open about those things, because it's nice for the kid who is really, really suffering to know that it's not just me, whereas I don't know, maybe it was just my school or something, but like you just didn't talk about those things,
Mhm.
and if you felt it, it's just like, yeah, well, you're weird for being nervous right now, or you're weird for being sad. Like, don't let anybody know. Just put that mask on, not a COVID mask, like a metaphorical mask on, and
The
go to
only kind
school
of
and
mask
suck
you
it
should
up.
not wear. Yeah, that's the only kind of mask you shouldn't wear.
Yeah, that's
That's
when you shouldn't wear a mask, is a metaphorical mask to hide your sadness.
yeah.
But no, like
So
I just think that Farley was amazing for that. That's part of what made him so unique and special.
I mean, I think that actually that's the reason I really love that whole joke with the Carpenter song in the car,
Mhm.
because they pretend to not like it because they're dudes, and dudes aren't supposed to like the Carpenters because of some
Yes.
arbitrary rules of what dudeness are supposed to be,
Yeah.
and it was there was something vulnerable, just like really touching about seeing them just like rejoice in something that moved them.
Yeah.
And I'm reading so much into this simple joke, but because that's the that's the level he elevated the material to, where like
Mhm.
I felt personally moved by that joke.
Mhm.
Now I did want to address this. This is something that does not come up for some reason. This is okay. Have you ever seen the one time that Chris Farley hosted SNL?
I saw a clip of it last night when he was out on stage with Chris Rock and Tim Meadows, I think it
Yeah, Tim
was.
Meadows.
Yeah, and like there is kind of an awkward vibe to it. Like, he seems like, because I know he was like fresh out of rehab and trying to start over, I think. Am I
Mhm.
right?
I believe you are right. I don't have the exact timeline, but
Hmm.
regardless, it is haunting.
Yeah.
That made me so uncomfortable to like everything about that was in poor taste to me.
I didn't even
So
see any of the sketches, so I don't know.
me neither. I mean, I'm really just talking about the opening monologue, which is I mean, that's the point of controversy. Like people will talk about that as being like one of SNL's low points, the Chris Farley monologue, because you see
Mhm.
in this sketch this like they're taking real shit that was going on in his life and they're just
Mhm.
making him. They're making a joke out of it and by extension him.
Mhm.
So for viewers or listeners who don't they haven't seen this monologue, it starts out with you hear the SNL guy say, "Ladies and gentlemen, Chris Farley," but Chris doesn't show up on stage. You cut to him in backstage, and he is just stuffing his face. Then he starts flirting with the girls, and they're making a bunch of jokes about his weight. And then you cut to Lorne Michaels saying, "Oh, I knew this would happen," because Chris Farley probably was very publicly going through recovery.
Mhm.
So they're trying to find out who to replace him as host. I'm just like,
Mhm.
what are you people doing? Like,
Mhm.
I get like it's the elephant in the room,
Yeah.
but the way to deal with that is to not force him to be living this stuff out the at the pleasure of others. It was just
Mhm.
um and the thing that caps it off is that in real life he died only 7 weeks later.
That's crazy. I didn't know that.
Yeah, and I had read
Wow.
that before I watched the monologue, so it was already in this layer of awkward and sad.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah, I only saw the very end of it because that's all they showed in that documentary. But like it definitely felt weird, and he
mm.
didn't really seem like himself. Like he seemed like a person who was readjusting to a world now sober. Um, and a lot of people, comedians, struggle with that. I don't know if I can be funny without drugs and alcohol. Like
Yeah,
it's the only way I know how to do it is loaded. And a lot of the time it's like the opposite is like, no, once you get clean, like you are gonna be funnier. You thought you were really funny when you were loaded, but you weren't as funny as you could have been. But anyway, be that as it may, I thought that there was a weird vibe. All I heard was whenever he finally got to the stage and Rock and Tim Meadows like welcomed him, and he was like, he had like a moment of honesty, like, I know that, things have been crazy for me and blah, blah, blah. But I'm doing better now. We're going to have a great show, yada, yada, yada. But it did feel a little weird. I didn't know that contextually that's what happened right before that. That's weird, but I do wonder how much Farley was down to do that, regardless of if it hurt his feelings, because I think that that guy was used to using all the things in his life that hurt his feelings for comedy. Like
and that's
it,
the tragedy, though, right? I mean, that's
yeah, yeah,
because he spent his whole time at SNL making fun of his weight, making
hmm
fun of the idea that he was dumb,
hmm
making fun of his anxiety, and
hmm
uh, there's a good natured version of that, and then there's something that's really callous. And people say that the Chippendale sketch, iconic,
hmm
hilarious,
hmm
but people say it really damaged him in a
yeah,
serious way, right?
yeah,
So he probably was down to do this show in the context that we've spelled out, but that's he's like almost a victim. um and there's almost like a sense of Stockholm syndrome, I think, when you feel captive to an audience and that's what's keeping you going, and you're going to do anything to make them happy. Because
hmm
that's, if you don't have the drugs anymore, that's going to be your high or what gets you
hmm
through this painful experience.
yeah, yeah. He loved attention, no matter how he could get it. Like he talked about that when he was a child. He
Mm.
was that kid, mom, look at what I can do. Look at what I can do. Uh, which a lot of comedians are. Like you see that quality in a kid, and it's like they might become a comedian someday because they have that thing uh, that they just want people to pay attention to them, and they want to prove that they're special. And a lot of the time, like in Farley's case, he was. He was extremely special. But yeah, he used those things. He just opened himself up in such a way that no matter how damaging those things were, um, he was going to use it anything to make people laugh. Literally anything. at his own expense or whatever. It is tragic for sure.
It's
I
very
pretty much just reiterated what you said, but I stretched it out for 4 minutes.
you
But anyway,
elaborated on it.
yeah,
That's what a
let's
podcast
let's
should be.
let's cut that out too.
um, so we've come to a point where I'm going to circle back. I'm going to ask you that question again. Is there a moment or a scene in Tommy Boy that you would call the funniest?
I'm glad that you re-asked because I thought about it in the middle. So I think if I had to name one other scene, and it wouldn't be fat guy in a little coat because I feel like that's too easy. It would probably be when Spade is looking at the woman who's about to go skinny dipping in the pool. And it's such a dumb line, but when Farley walks by and Spade's like, "Don't do the weight room thing," and he's like, "Do you know where the weight room is?" And he's like bulking out his chest and shit. And she's like, "No, I'm sorry." He's like, "I'll figure it out." Or no, she's like, "No," and he's like, "I'll figure it out." And she's like, "Sorry," and he's like, "Pfft." Like he almost does this thing of like, "Fuck you," you know, and then like immediately on his face, he's like, "God, I'm an idiot." But I just think like just a little thing like that is just like Farley can take the most throwaway line and mine it for something that's funny. And I just love that. And then the whole scene whenever he comes back in and he's giving Spade all kinds of shit for, pretty girl out there. I think that's a pretty funny scene.
Yeah, and that's the only scene where, like, in this battle of wits, verbal wit, he has the upper hand, which was nice
Yeah.
to see. Because
Oh,
David Spade is good at playing these smug bastards, and
yeah.
yeah,
He's made a career on it and he's so good at it. I think Spade, for 1 second, because I'm a Spade fan, I think that he is a very underrated comedian today, just like on some like spur of the moment joke stuff. I don't know how many people watched the show Lights Out with David Spade, but it was coming into fruition and then the pandemic hit. It had to go virtual. And I think that kind of killed the show. But did
mm,
you ever see it?
no,
Okay, I think it was Comedy Central, but it was him and three other comedians who were all funny, prominent comedians, and they would just talk about current events and just make fun of it. And but it was like really funny. And Spade is he's just a super super funny dude. I think that he lived in Farley's shadow a lot, and then also in Sandler's shadow. But like Loki, I think that Spade is underrated. Um, and also what was the other thing I was going to say? Oh, another contender for very funny moment is whenever Spade and Farley, well, Richard and Tommy, they're out trying to sell the brake pads and they're getting no's, and every time Farley's just like, "Gotcha, thanks," and the guy's like, "No," and he's like, "Perfect, thank you for your time." Right after they establish that they're not going to take no for an answer, but then they get to the guy who says maybe, and they start trying to like sell him a little bit. And then Farley goes into the whole thing of like, let's say this is your car and you're driving down the road, you're driving that whole scene where he just destroys this dude's model car, lights it on fire, all these things. It's like, it's kind of hard because whenever you've seen something 8 million times, it's like it loses its potency. But going back and thinking about how fucking hard I used to laugh when I was a kid. And he would do that whole thing of destroying that car and like, "Here comes the meat wagon," and like all that whole thing. It's just Farley. Like you could give that dude anything and he's gonna make it fun.
yeah,
He's gonna find a way.
that joke was a ride. That joke was like a journey, and by the time he lights it on fire, man, it was like I felt like so like I had just been taken along for a serious adventure on that
Yeah.
joke that we reached the finish line and it was as glorious as was promised. No, that's a great scene.
Yeah. Okay. So I think that like if we're gonna talk about Farley, like you can't overlook some of the bit parts that he played in other people's movies back then, which would be like the bus driver in Billy Madison, or the security guard in Wayne's World. And then I think he came back in Wayne's World too. I can't remember because like when they're setting up Wayne stock, he has a hilarious scene on the stage. But yeah, in Wayne's World 1, he was actually the limo driver That's
I
what it
remember
was. And he
that.
was telling him where Mr. Big was going to be. But it's like Farley just had this ability to, like, no matter how small of a role you gave him, he was going to fucking sell it and become one of the most memorable parts of the movie. And like the bus driver scene in Billy Madison, where he's someone throws something at him and he's like, "Hey," and then he's like, "I'll turn this bus around. That'll end your precious little field trip." And he's like so mad that he just starts, like, you can tell he clinches everything and tries to make his face as beet red as he possibly can, and he just looks like he's gonna explode. And like just like things like that, like the way that that dude would do anything to be funny. um and then, other movies like that we didn't really get to touch on, but like Beverly Hills Ninja has some funny shit, which I think that like it isn't one of his best ones, but he has a lot of really funny stuff in Almost Heroes.
Is that
If
with
you ever
Matthew
saw
Perry?
that. Yeah,
Is that
Matthew
with,
Perry.
I've not seen that yet.
It's
And
worth watching, dude. It's pretty funny. I don't think that it holds up as like an amazing movie today. Maybe not. I don't know. I haven't seen it in years. But all I know is I'll look up some of the funniest scenes from that movie on YouTube sometimes, like even today, and fucking crack up because it's just so funny.
yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, I'm really intrigued by the idea of them making a movie together, and it's set in it's like a period piece, right?
total period piece. Yeah, like they're like old time, like American soldiers, and like I think that's what it is. I can't remember for sure. Again, I saw the bulk of that movie when I was too young to understand what the hell was going on. All I knew was Farley was funny.
Yeah, so I would actually like to check that out. I know that Beverly Hills Ninja is actually a movie that kind of hurt Chris Farley's feelings. I think he felt like he was at a low point after he did that, from what I
Mhm.
remember. I know that Tommy Boy and Black Sheep, those are the big two, and really Tommy Boy is like his biggest movie. That's what people would think of him as. Oh, we didn't
Mhm.
mention this, but obviously before he died, he was going to be the voice of Shrek.
Yeah, I've seen the YouTube clip, and honestly, I'm one of the biggest Farley fans, but I think that Mike Myers was the better choice. After hearing that like test footage with like the animation, I'm sure a lot of
Mhm.
people have seen that video on YouTube. But Farley could have done it, and it would have been cool, and we would have never known any better. But knowing what I know now about how Mike Myers played that, like, yeah, it's Mike Myers really knocked that out of the park.
So you're saying that you're glad that Chris Farley died?
you know, I didn't come on this podcast to have words put in my mouth, man. No, I'm just kidding. Uh, no, I mean, like, I do just think like it would have been really interesting to see him do, because it's also
Yeah.
a franchise. It's like it wasn't just one movie. Uh,
No, but you're totally right though that Mike Myers as Shrek. I mean, that's an iconic performance, and I can't imagine even after seeing that clip, I still can't imagine not having Mike Myers be Shrek. So,
yeah,
um, I'm sure it would have been really good for Chris's career to play in a movie that was as well written as Shrek and really give him some good material. But
that's actually
his
probably the saddest part that I've never considered, is how that would have rejuvenated his career. He would have been huge if he would have done
yeah,
Shrek, and he would have been endeared to a whole new audience. And I do think Farley had that ability to play, because even in that test footage, you can hear like the emotional vulnerability to play that he was gonna come at that character with. And I think it's just his voice was really well suited for a kids movie. And it just would have been cool, yeah, to see him do that new direction.
well,
Uh
it's
yeah.
very similar to John Belushi in that John Belushi was supposed to be he was supposed to be Peter Venkman in Ghostbusters, right?
What? I never knew that.
Oh
I don't know
yeah,
a lot about Belushi's career. I really don't.
yeah. I mean, obviously you didn't grow up with Belushi, and
Hmm.
uh, I'm a huge fan of the Blues Brothers. Like that's a movie I'm definitely going to talk about on this podcast one day. I
Hmm.
absolutely adore that.
Yeah.
So I'm a fan of him through that, and I discovered these things like that he was supposed to play Peter Venkman in a few other movies, but that's the big one.
Hmm.
And I love Bill Murray. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Same.
no way I'm going to say that Bill Murray shouldn't have been in Ghostbusters. But
Hmm.
man, John Belushi was at a low point in his career, and that would have done such great things for his career. It's just sad that he didn't get a chance to really get that rejuvenation that he deserved too. So, I mean, you can honestly make a whole video about John Belushi and Chris Farley.
I was just gonna say that. That's another strange parallel. But also, like, so have you seen the Adam Sandler Farley song?
Oh, of course, dude. I mean, that
Yeah,
made me
dude,
tear up.
it made me fucking weep. It still does. Every time I see that shit, I just weep. But uh yeah, whenever he says, I think one of the lines is like, slow down, you'll end up like Belushi and Candy. And Farley was like, those guys are my heroes. That's all fine and dandy. Like he knew the road he was going down, I think. And I think he just idolized those guys so much. And that's not to say that that was the only thing driving his addiction. Of course it wasn't. But I think he just loved being that guy. He loved living the life of John Belushi, like following in those footsteps of being like, this is who I am. I'm a huge personality. I'm really funny. And I like to party. I like to do everything to the max.
Well, I think it's a similar thing to where you had a lot of rock and roll stars die really young, like Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin
Club. Yeah.
Yeah. And then Kurt Cobain, I mean, his lifestyle and what he was doing to himself. And people were like, well, do you want to end up like those guys? And he was kind of like, he almost saw that as a destiny that he could embrace. Right. Now, it's actually funny we bring up Kurt Cobain because there's a really sweet little clip of after Nirvana played SNL during the ending of the show where everybody just says goodbye, and you can see Chris Farley and Kurt Cobain like shaking hands with each other, and they're really excited to meet each other. So it's just that's a little heartwarming thing.
That is, yeah, I like that. I was gonna show you one thing. So me and my two buddies that I did improv with and stuff, we all did a lot of comedy shit together. We recreated this pic of Sandler, Spade, and Farley all backstage at SNL, and it's kind of like an iconic picture. Is there any I'm trying to think of last thoughts about Farley?
I mean, I think the main thing to keep in mind is, as good as Tommy Boy is and as fun as it is, it really means more to me as a testament of somebody whose career got cut short, way too short. And like you, I'm always going to wonder, what could this guy have done? What levels could he have risen to, right? If he could have pursued his passions to the fullest. But we'll always have Chris Farley's output, and that means so much to millions and millions of people. So
yeah, definitely. He had a lot of demons and he couldn't overcome them. But hilarious dude, fucking the funniest sketches on SNL. Some of my favorite sketches of all time are Farley sketches. Yeah, it's just it's sad. I want to end this as somber and as bummer as I possibly can. Obviously. So I'm speaking a little softer. I'm a little less enthused.
On that note, Andy, share your social media. Plug yourself. Sell your brand.
Oh, okay. My brand. Well, on Twitter and Instagram, I'm Andy Compton _ because there is a DJ overseas who has been Andy Compton as well. And he's been famous for a long time. And he has Andy Compton locked up across social media. So I'm Andy Compton _ on Instagram and Twitter. Ethan and Edna has Instagram and Twitter at Ethan Edna Movie, at Tin Box Movie. Tin Box is a movie I made. And that's really all I have to say.
All right. Well, thanks for joining me. Thanks for talking about this wonderful movie and this wonderful man. It's always a pleasure. It's just a pleasure to revisit the great work this guy did.
Yeah.
And I wish you the best of luck on all of your cinematic endeavors, right? And hopefully we can have you back on the program to talk about even more cult classic comedies.
Absolutely. I'd love to come back. We'll do like Dumb and Dumber or something.
Yeah. In fact, I think I'll make a new podcast, Cult Classic Comedy, but change every C to a K. So it can be a good KKK.
Oh, that's genius for like just from a marketing standpoint.
Talk
That is
about
genius.
branding yourself, Andy.
Yeah.
I mean, I know what I'm doing.
Yeah,
I
for
know what
sure,
I'm
dude.
doing.
Yeah, that one's gonna really take off for you for sure.
It will really expand my audience, I'm sure.
Mhm.
So on that note, again, thanks, Andy. To
Yep.
everyone, thanks for listening. Like the video if you want, subscribe if you want, and stay tuned for more videos in the future.